Okay, looks like everything is working, and Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch. Boy. Okay, I'm a little late. I was hoping to start this at 7 a.m., but it is 7 a.m., 7:15, 7:19 Pacific, so it is still early for me, and that's why I am drinking coffee. And today's selection is some random coffee that was on special at my grocery store. I don't know what special means. That could mean they were trying to get rid of it, or it was on sale, or it's new. So this morning, I want to talk about and look into a new post by Freddie. And let me just figure out this fancy new feature, see if I can pull it off. I didn't launch this other app. So here we go. So, where is it? So this is a related one. Basically, Freddie announced that there's a new structure for using Business Central Docker images. And the essence, let me just switch over here. The essence is that rather than having to pull down full Docker images for every version of BC, for every build of Windows, every permutation of Windows and BC, they're going to start using what are apparently called Docker artifacts. And I had never heard of, I'm not a Docker expert, but I'd never heard of Docker artifacts before last week. So, but I think it makes sense if I'm understanding it correctly. So Microsoft will stop producing Docker images and instead publish builds as artifacts, which can be used together with a generic Docker image to run the image you want. This reminds me, if you remember, back in the day of virtual PCs. I don't know if they still use this term anymore, but back in the day of when people were trying to run Microsoft Virtual PC on their laptops and have different environments, basically virtual machines on their laptops, they had what was called a differencing disk. So they would publish, the Windows Server virtual PC image, and then you'd attach the differencing disk to get SQL Server or Dynamics GP or whatever other environment you needed. So you still had your base image, which remained untouched. You'd attach your differencing disk, and you'd work within your differencing disk. So that's what this kind of reminds me of. And let me just check a few things. So with that, back to his article here. Why, and he explains the complications of dealing with multiple underlying platform versions and images, from Windows to .NET to SQL Server, and then all the core infrastructure for Business Central. And then there's OS version issues and incompatibilities, and then Docker gets really sensitive to different OS versions. So rather than doing this, where you have the specific Docker images, which are pretty big, you have this. So you have your base Docker images or base Docker image, then you download this artifact, which has just the specifics for the build that you want, the Business Central build, and that gets attached to your Business Central container. And I need to look into how artifacts technically work in Docker, not to become an expert, just to kind of better understand and confirm my understanding is correct. So the idea is you're going to pull your generic Docker image, and then you will download artifacts and run them. And what's cool is he has, of course, modified nav container helper to make that possible. So we need to update nav container helper to 0707 or later. So let me work on that first. And of course, I can never remember Docker commands. So I have a list of Docker commands that I keep in OneNote, and I've just copied them here. And so let's see if I have, probably don't have a command, but there's a command to get your your nav container helper version. Let me just see if I can remember that. Okay, there we go. So let me just open a new tab here and let's see if this works. Okay, so we have nav container helper 0700, and according to the blog post, we need 0707. Now, the way I have updated nav container helper, because I haven't figured out a better way yet, is to do this. And there may be a better way to update it. I am open to suggestions. So let me just comment that out. Let me run that. And this is in my normal create sandbox script, but I just want to run it separately, just make sure I get the latest version. And also, if I recall correctly, I was bit by the feature in PowerShell where you can have multiple versions of these modules, and it may arbitrarily run an older version. So you'll be testing and you can't figure out what's going on, and it's because, let me just do it this way, it's because it was running an older version of a module that you had installed, even though you updated a new version. And there, oh, cool. Okay, so we have nav container helper 0709. So we are updated, and I only see one version, but let me just see if there's a way to show all versions. Get installed module, all versions. Oh, that's pretty self-explanatory. So all versions. Are allowed only when you specify a single name. Okay, so what we want is name, and we want nav container helper, all versions. And there we go. So first, let me just save this command. And now we have 3 versions here, and there is a command to clean this up. PowerShell remove old module versions. Okay, and just to show you what I'm looking at, this looks like something I have run into before, and I think this is the blog post that informed me about the multiple versions. Okay, and so, yeah, funny, exact same as for nav container helper. How to uninstall older versions, multiple entries, recursively uninstalls the previous versions. Okay, so get installed module, uninstall module, what if? Okay, so we're going to copy this, save it to my PowerShell commands, and it's got the what if here. So I'm going to paste that in there. So we're looking for nav container helper and get installed module, and then loop through those versions, and If it is not the latest version, uninstall it. And so let's just run the what if version of that. There we go. It's just taking a while. Let's see who this is while that is running, because that is a handy eclipses. Who is eclipses? I don't know. About me. Want to give them credit. Sergio Castelluccio. Thank you. Very cool. Specializes in Seaside AL and Azure DevOps in Malta. Very cool. Well, I think I included, maybe I didn't. I don't remember if I included in my blog post about this. I'm pretty sure that I ran this multiple version issue and referenced a few blogs. So, okay. So it did a what if, performing the operation uninstall in 65670. So let's go ahead and remove the what if and rerun this, and that will clean up our old versions. Okay. Let's see if that works. Takes a long time. It's very strange. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, once we clean those up, we're at 0709 now, and then we need to find the artifact URL. Okay, so there's a function for this, 16.2 country US select latest. Okay, so it looks like that is done. So let's just verify our versions. Oh. Okay, so we only have 0709 nav container helper. Okay, so now this is my old sandbox script. So let me just create a new one using only the examples that Freddie provides here. So we're going to use this new function get BC artifact URL in order to get the URL for just our artifact, or what in my brain I think of as a differencing disk for Docker. And then over here, this is our new BC container. And okay, so I'm just going to copy this. Okay, and this is slightly different than the version that I'm used to running, but we will do a test. Normally I have all these additional parameters, but for now I'm just going to go with this. So admin, password 1, plain text, and those are the credentials for user password authentication. So let's just run this. Clear that. Let's run it and see what happens. Container name test. Okay. Okay. So while that is running, let's take a look at this. So the running container should work exactly like a running container based on an image. It just takes a little longer to start. So that makes sense. It's starting up the container, and then presumably it's attaching those, I've already forgotten what they're called, artifacts Such a strange name. So it's attaching the artifact or my diff disk, and then it starts up. So generic images are out there. So I'm assuming I need to have new generic images. So while that is downloading, let me just open up a new window, and let's just take a look at the images. My mouse will work. Let's take a look at the new or the images that I have and see what it is pulling down. And for this, I am going to look at my images. And we have Sandbox LTSC 2019 2 weeks ago. Sandbox that's an old kind of deprecated one. And then I have Portainer. So no new images yet, so it looks like it's downloading those. So this may take a while. Okay, so we have some time to kill, it looks like. So it's probably re-downloading those, or downloading the latest container image, or image, I should say. And okay. So how do you kill time on live streams? I would normally edit this out in a video, but this is new to me. So generic images are out there. Nav Container Helper is supporting this. All existing on-prem artifacts have been published, and a number of the later sandbox artifacts. Play around with get artifact, get BC artifact URL, get nav artifact, get the URLs for various versions. Okay, so this is referencing 16.2, so I guess, is there a way to just get the latest? That would be one question. So let's give that a try. So if I go over here, let's say select latest version 16.2. What if I just want the latest? Okay, cool. So without the version 16.2, it pulls a URL. So let's try this. Version 16.1, and let's just try this. No, I don't want a update. Sure. Okay. Well, while that is running, so it looks like the version number is optional. You don't have to specify 16.2, and if you leave that out, select latest, looks like it's just grabbing the latest, which was 16.2.13.509. And if this would ever update. Okay. And if you experience issues, you can post them to Nav Container Helper on GitHub. And July update will be the last image to be published as a Docker image. So after July, you'll want to be excuse me, using this artifact. And of course, like much of the SaaS world, now all of those blog posts, all of those videos that have shown you how to use Nav Container Helper, how to pull down images and create Docker containers, those are going to be out of date or obsolete because this new method with artifacts will be required or strongly recommended. So you have to be careful about that, of course. Come on, that is still downloading. Okay, so the next blog post goes into more details about the new functions and how they work. And let's see if I have that handy. Okay. So the follow-up is this post by Freddie, working with artifacts. And so he goes into a little more detail about artifacts and how you find them, what do they contain. So get BC artifact URL and originally submitted by Waldo. Nice. Storage account determines where to get the artifacts from. BC artifacts is the storage account for the public artifacts. Type on-prem or sandbox. Version default is blank, all versions. Okay, full or partial version number. Country is your localization. Select all closest, second to last major or latest. Okay, all. Okay, so select all. So let's try this. Oh, okay, this finally worked. So get BC artifact URL dash question mark gives you the help and it lists all these parameters. So let's try one of these. So instead of version, let's try select all. Okay, so these are all the versions that are available from 15.4 as artifacts, presumably 15.4 through the latest 16.2 build. Nice. Okay, closest requires you to supply a full version number. Okay, major and minor version must match. Second to last major is CI/CD scenarios. To identify the next minor release SaaS token when requesting artifacts from a secured storage account. Okay. So try to run this PowerShell snippet to investigate return values. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens. Okay. So get US Sandbox artifact URL for current version latest, 16.2 13.509. Got it. And that was using get BC artifact URL country US. That's it. Interesting that country US was in quotation marks. I don't quite understand PowerShell yet, so this seems like strangely inconsistent. It apparently doesn't matter, but I suppose if your country has spaces in it, that matters. So we're going to do country US select all, which we just saw earlier, and that's 15.4, 16.2, so you can pull down all of these artifacts. And what else did we have here? Okay. And this is US version 16.2, a very specific version, select closest. So this is a specific build actually. And so let's see what happens with closest. It says this is 13.509 Oh, oh, 702 is the build that is closest to build 13700. And this is get 16.1. And that is the build available, presumably the latest, version 15. And that's the 15.4 version. Okay, so here's a different country. Wow. Okay, so these are on-prem. Yep, type on-prem. Okay, so it looks like it defaults to SaaS sandboxes unless you specify type on-prem. And yes, sandbox is the default. Looks like bold indicates default. Okay, cool. So with Business Central, we do not use CU numbers. We use version numbers like 14.7, 15.4, 16.2, and then get nav artifact, and that's for nav 2016 to 2018. And that has 4 parameters. Okay, so I don't work with on-prem, so this is download artifacts as a function, which downloads them as described. Okay, this is just get BC artifact URL. This is the actual download artifact. And so what did I do over here? Okay, still downloading. Wow. So this is new BC container, and it is referencing artifact URL. So I'm assuming internally that the new BC container, when given the artifact URL, will automatically perform the download artifact call and integrate that into the container. So if you use download artifacts, you can use these parameters. We obviously would just use the get artifact URL or get BC artifact URL. It downloads it, it unpacks it, and saves it to this BC artifacts cache sandbox, the manifest JSON. What is a manifest JSON? Okay, let's just see if I missed an explanation. In the US folder, you will find manifest JSON plus all the things that are specific to the US application. Okay, so this is presumably the artifact config information. We've got version, we've got the platform, license file, and database. Cronus license file is already in the database and is not in the artifact. We also have a sandbox country called base. That's the W1 data running in sandbox mode. Looking into the platform artifact in these directories, you'll find everything from the platform plus a number of W1 things. Okay, so the W1 is apparently a dependency for localizations. Okay, flush container helper cache. We'll flush the artifacts cache, but keep the artifacts which have been used in the last 7 days. Okay, probably have to test that to fully understand it, but I'm assuming that's to clean up your old artifacts. And deleting oldest cache folder until the cache is less than 10 gigs. Okay, so it's cleanup. Okay, new BC image. Okay, you thought you got rid of images and a new function appears which can build an image. You can build an image based on the artifacts and use it again and again. Okay, so instead of using a base image plus artifacts, you can build a new image based on the artifacts locally in order to avoid having to download things. Okay, wow. So it gives you a lot more control, it looks like. And this is still, there we go. So downloaded newer image for the generic base image 10.0.17. Downloading application artifacts 16.2 and unpacking artifact. Okay. So there we go. It's unzipping. My scripts. Okay, so you can create this new image, artifact URL, image name, so you can merge the two together. My scripts. Oh, I need coffee. Okay. So this will be next for me to try to get the URL, new BC image, and the inspect. I'll have to figure out what that means. Okay, so you can build an image, publish it to a private repo, or you can leave it to people to build images on the fly. Cumbersome to let you build an image and run it. So why don't we make it easier? New BC container. Okay, so I guess it's doing all of this for us. IC is walking us through what's going on internally. New BC container has a new parameter called artifact URL. Ta-da! And is more or less everything you need to know. However, if you specify both artifact URL and image name, which I'm not doing there, then new BC container will test whether new image name is based on the artifact in the current OS, and it will run the image. If not, it will create a new BC image and build it from there. Wow. Okay, so it's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, thankfully. Hopefully this just does everything I need, and I can remain kind of clueless about what goes on behind the scenes, because I personally don't yet have a need to get too elaborate on images. But I assume if you're doing some elaborate CI/CD builds on Azure DevOps, you might want to control all this stuff. Okay, so remove nav container test, measure commands, takes 8 minutes on his machine, so I'm not going to run it. The second is only a little more than 3 minutes. And this has definitely been running for several minutes, so I'm assuming I'm well past the 3-minute category. So measure command. I have a Docker image called my own sandbox. Okay. So you try it twice. Presumably because you're only removing the container and you already have a local image. So nav container helper is only needing to create a new container based off of your pre-existing image and the latest artifact. So it's creating an image called my own. The first time you run this, my own image has to get created. So that takes several minutes, roughly 5.5 minutes more the first run. But once you have that local image, you do not need to pull that image down from the cloud, and it's able to build a new container based on your local image and this artifact. That makes sense. Okay, so now how are we doing here? Unpacking artifact, downloading prereqs. Okay, so hopefully this goes, there we go. There's our container stuff, LTSC 2019. Okay. copying platform artifacts. Okay, so that is using artifact URL, BC Artifacts, Azure Edge, Sandbox, US. Creating container test from image. Okay, so that was our base image. Okay, so you said run this twice. Okay, so it's the same container name. So we can do the same thing. This container was called, where is it? New BC container. It is called test as well. Lots of waiting. And this is running on a VM. So I have a, let's see. This is a Server 2019 VM running on a desktop class Hyper-V server. And it's fairly fast. I also have a dedicated physical machine that I have Docker on, but this has actually worked okay. I suspect that machine's a little faster, but this is more convenient. So I'll do some comparison tests to see if that other one is finished, or other one is faster. This is taking a while. So this first one, this takes a while, kind of like the old version of having to pull down the images, but that was more, it looked like download time. You'd see all those symbols getting downloaded, or all those files getting downloaded, looked like the matrix. This looks like it's a little more processing as it's merging the artifacts in. But this looks more like the container setup. So SQL Express, service tier files. Okay. Files in extensions, test, creating container from image. Okay, so we're in the container portion. Come on. Okay, still waiting. So it takes 8 minutes the first time, 3 minutes the second time. So this will be a time saver. And you won't need to download containers as often in theory. You don't want to have the image named after the version. You just specify a tag yourself. So the image will just be some generic name. But that image will be, presumably, will be version specific. Yeah. So you'll maintain those images, but I suspect they will pile up just like they do currently. So if I go over here and Docker images a actually okay, so now we see the new image, Dynamics Nav 10 generic. It's going to take a long time to get rid of that nav name, it looks like. And now if we say Docker containers, Docker, what is it? I can never remember. Docker PS. Docker PS. So we have, wow. We have generic container 4 minutes ago called test. Interesting. Okay, so it's based off of that image. Got it. And we don't see the artifact that it is tied to. So how do we get the version information here? I guess that would be a question. So I see that I have a new container test. I see that it is based off of this generic image, but I don't know what artifact it is using. Okay. Let's see if it talks about that. Okay. Generic images are out there. BC artifact, nav artifact. Okay. Well, if anyone has gotten this far in this very long session, I'm curious, once you create a new container based off of the new generic image and artifact, how, oh, I have a Docker image called my own sandbox 16.1. That's the image, I see. I didn't specify the image name here. Maybe that is it. Yeah. Yep, nothing here. 10.0, which I don't know what that means. And that's the same one Buddy showed here. He had his own image. So, okay, some homework to do. So that is the long-winded review of the new architecture for Docker containers, images, or containers using generic images and artifacts. And essentially, it shouldn't, behind the scenes is different, but how you use the containers is very similar. So as long as you're using nav container helper and new BC container, use the latest version, 0707 or higher, this should be kind of transparent for you. And with that, I'm going to drink some more coffee and try and get some work done.